In the heart of Singapore, a story is hidden beneath the surface, one that challenges everything we thought we knew about this nation's identity. While we commonly classify Singaporeans into four major ethnic groups, Chinese, Malay, Indian, and Eurasian, what if these labels only scratch the surface of a far deeper, more complex truth? A genetic tapestry woven over centuries of migration, trade, and intermarriage is unraveling mysteries that defy conventional wisdom. In this video, we're about to uncover the darkest DNA secrets of the Singaporean people. From unexpected lineages to ancient migrations, get ready to explore a hidden ancestry that redefines what it means to be Singaporean. Chapter 1. The complex genetic makeup of Singaporeans. At first glance, Singapore's society might appear neatly divided into four major ethnic groups: Chinese, Malay, Indian, and Eurasian. These categories have shaped cultural identities for generations, creating a sense of belonging and community. However, modern genetic research reveals that the reality of Singaporean ancestry is far more intricate than these labels suggest. According to studies conducted by the National University of Singapore, genetic diversity within the population points to centuries of migration, intermarriage, and cultural blending that make the idea of a pure ethnic identity almost impossible. Singapore's strategic position as a bustling port city has played a significant role in this genetic complexity. Over the centuries, waves of migration from neighboring regions such as Malaysia, Indonesia, India, and China have left their mark. The flow of people from different parts of Asia and even Europe has led to an environment where genetic backgrounds are intricately mixed. As researchers at the Singapore General Hospital have found, DNA tests reveal that a large portion of the Singaporean population carries markers from multiple regions, despite identifying with a single ethnic group. For example, Chinese Singaporeans, often associated with ancestral roots in China, may possess genetic markers that trace back to Southeast Asia, indicating a long history of intermingling with local populations. Similarly, Malay Singaporeans, traditionally thought to have a homogeneous genetic heritage from the Malay archipelago, often show significant genetic overlaps with Chinese and Indian populations. This is particularly evident in areas like southern Malaysia and the Straits of Malacca, where Malay, Chinese, and Indian communities have coexisted for centuries. A study led by the Genome Institute of Singapore in 2017 found that these overlapping genetic traits reflect centuries of trade, marriage, and migration, which have shaped the island's population in ways that labels like Malay or Chinese cannot fully encompass. These findings challenge the traditional understanding of ethnic identity in Singapore. While cultural practices, language, and religion often define how people identify, the science of genetics reveals a more fluid and intertwined history. This genetic diversity goes beyond the confines of cultural identity, emphasizing the interconnectedness of Singapore's population. As a result, the labels of Chinese, Malay, Indian, and Eurasian are increasingly seen as cultural markers rather than strict genetic definitions, pointing to a deeper, more complex heritage that lies beneath the surface. Chapter 2. The role of migration in shaping Singapore's ancestry. The genetic makeup of Singapore is deeply intertwined with its role as a vibrant trading hub throughout history. Long before Singapore became an independent city-state, it was a crossroads for travelers and traders from all corners of the globe. Its strategic location in Southeast Asia has made it a natural point of convergence for diverse ethnic groups. Over the centuries, waves of migrants from China, India, Indonesia, and beyond arrived, each contributing to the island's complex genetic landscape. From the early 19th century, when Chinese immigrants began to settle in Singapore in large numbers, to the influx of Indian and Malay traders and laborers, migration has shaped the population in profound ways. According to a study by the Genome Institute of Singapore, this early migration not only brought diverse cultures, but also left a lasting genetic imprint on the people of Singapore. The early Chinese settlers, for instance, didn't come as a homogeneous group from a single region of China. Instead, they represented a variety of dialect groups from different parts of the country. This already diverse genetic pool was further expanded as they intermarried with local Malays, Indians, and Eurasians, leading to a unique blend of genetic markers that can be traced across different populations today. In addition to the Chinese, Indian laborers and traders, who arrived in Singapore primarily during British colonial rule, contributed significantly to the genetic diversity of the island. The Indian community, particularly those from Tamil Nadu and the Indian subcontinent, added yet another layer of diversity to the genetic makeup of Singapore. Similarly, Malays and other Southeast Asians, who have lived in the region for centuries, have intermingled with other populations, further enriching the genetic fabric of the nation. Today, genetic studies continue to reveal surprising ancestral links for many Singaporeans. A 2016 study published in Nature Communications found that the genetics of many Singaporeans point to ancient links not just to Southeast Asia, but to other distant regions in Asia and even Europe. For example, many Singaporeans of Chinese descent have genetic connections to people from southern India, which suggests centuries of trade and migration between the two regions. The impact of migration on Singapore's genetic diversity is a testament to the island's role as an international crossroads. Singapore's population is a living record of global movement, an ever-evolving mosaic of peoples whose ancestry span across continents. The diverse gene pool reflects centuries of intermingling and cultural exchange, reinforcing Singapore's identity as a melting pot not just of cultures, but also of genetic legacies from across the world. Chapter 3. Unraveling the Peranakan Mystery. One of the most captivating elements of Singapore's genetic story is the Peranakan community, a group that exemplifies the deep intermingling of cultures and genes that have shaped the island. Often referred to as Straits Chinese, the Peranakans trace their origins back to the 15th century, when Chinese traders began to settle in Southeast Asia and intermarried with the local Malay populations. Over time, this blending of cultures gave rise to a unique group with its own distinct traditions, language, and genetic markers. DNA studies of the Peranakan community have revealed fascinating insights into their mixed ancestry. While they identify culturally as Chinese, their genetic heritage is a compelling blend of both Chinese and Malay roots. Genetic markers found in Peranakans show that they carry significant genetic material from both groups, with specific markers linking them to southern China and the Malay archipelago. These findings suggest that the Peranakans are not simply a fusion of two cultures, but rather a unique group that embodies the complex history of migration, trade, and intermarriage in Southeast Asia. The Peranakan community's genetic identity is a testament to the interconnectedness of Southeast Asian peoples. It challenges the idea of rigid cultural boundaries, showing that identity cannot always be neatly categorized. According to a 2015 study by the National University of Singapore, the Peranakans' genetic makeup includes markers from both Chinese and Malay ancestry, but also contains traces of other Southeast Asian populations, further reinforcing the notion that Southeast Asia has long been a melting pot of cultures and peoples. Culturally, the Peranakans are a perfect example of how genetic heritage can transcend cultural boundaries. Their language, known as Baba Malay, is a blend of Malay and Chinese Hokkien, and their cuisine combines Chinese and Malay culinary traditions, resulting in a rich fusion of flavors that is distinctly Peranakan. Their customs, dress, and even religious practices reflect the melding of Chinese and Malay influences, creating a unique identity that cannot be reduced to one ethnicity alone. The Peranakan community is a living testament to the fluidity of cultural and genetic boundaries. They are proof that cultural identity is not simply about ethnicity, but about shared experiences, intermarriage, and the passage of time. In a world that often seeks to categorize and label, the Peranakans stand as a reminder of the beauty and complexity of human interconnectedness. Their history is a reflection of the broader story of Southeast Asia, where cultures, genes, and identities have long been in a state of constant exchange and evolution. Chapter 4. How DNA Studies Challenge Ethnic Labels. For centuries, Singapore has embraced a multicultural society with the population traditionally classified into four major ethnic groups: Chinese, Malay, Indian, and Eurasian. These categories have shaped cultural identity and social structures, often defining not only how people live, but how they perceive themselves and others. However, the advent of genetic testing has begun to challenge these traditional labels, revealing a far more complex and interconnected genetic landscape than previously imagined. DNA studies are increasingly shedding light on the deep genetic connections that exist among Singaporeans, regardless of their self-identified ethnic group. According to recent research by the Genome Institute of Singapore, genetic testing has uncovered that many Singaporeans, whether they identify as Chinese, Malay, Indian, or Eurasian, share common genetic markers with populations from different parts of Asia and beyond. For example, a person who identifies as Malay might have genetic markers linking them not only to Southeast Asia, but also to populations in southern India or even China. Similarly, someone who identifies as Chinese could have genetic connections to Malay or Indian ancestry. This revelation goes beyond the simple idea of cultural fusion. It shows that the rich diversity of Singapore's population is not just the result of centuries of intermarriage or cultural exchange, it is deeply embedded in the genetic makeup of its people. The genetic markers identified in Singaporeans reveal a more fluid, intertwined history that defies the rigid boundaries of ethnicity. These findings suggest that Singapore's population, much like the rest of Southeast Asia, has always been a dynamic melting pot of diverse genetic influences, shaped by migration, trade, and globalization. What this new understanding of genetics reveals is that ethnic categories, while still culturally significant, no longer hold up in the same way they once did. The idea of ethnic purity, once a central tenet in the formation of national identities, becomes increasingly outdated in light of genetic evidence. Singaporeans' identities, it turns out, are not as neatly confined to one ethnic group or another. Our genetic makeup, shaped by centuries of migration and intermingling, tells a different, far more nuanced story of who we are. This raises profound questions about the future of race and ethnicity in Singapore and beyond. If our identities are so interconnected at the genetic level, then what does it mean to be Chinese, Malay, Indian, or Eurasian? Can we continue to rely on these traditional ethnic labels, or is it time to rethink how we define ourselves and others? DNA studies have opened the door to a more inclusive, complex understanding of identity, one that recognizes our shared human heritage while celebrating the unique aspects of each individual's ancestry. The true beauty of Singapore's diversity lies not just in its cultural richness, but in the deep genetic connections that bind its people together, creating a shared history that transcends ethnicity. Chapter 5: The Genetic Mystery of the Singaporean Malay. When most people think of the Malay population in Singapore, they tend to associate it with a relatively homogeneous ethnic group with roots in the Malay archipelago, an area traditionally understood to encompass parts of modern-day Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei. For years, the Malay community in Singapore was thought to be primarily made up of people with shared ancestry from Southeast Asia, primarily the Malay Peninsula. However, recent genetic studies have upended these assumptions, revealing a far more complex and diverse genetic makeup among the Singaporean Malay population. Genetic research, particularly studies conducted by the Genome Institute of Singapore, has uncovered that the Malay population in Singapore carries genetic markers not just from Southeast Asia, but also from India, China, and even further afield. This finding speaks to a deeper, more intricate history of migration, trade, and intermarriage than previously thought. While the Malays are still predominantly linked to Southeast Asia, their genetic profile reflects centuries of exchange with neighboring populations, highlighting a rich history of cultural and genetic interaction. For example, genetic markers tied to Indian ancestry are notably prevalent among Malay Singaporeans, pointing to the long history of Indian influence in the region. The spread of Hinduism and later Islam from India played a pivotal role in shaping Malay culture and identity. Additionally, there are significant genetic traces of Chinese ancestry in some Malay Singaporeans, suggesting centuries of intermarriage and trade between Chinese settlers and local Malay communities, particularly in coastal regions like the Straits of Malacca. Furthermore, DNA analysis reveals markers from more distant populations, such as those from Central Asia or the Middle East, further highlighting the long history of maritime trade routes that connected Southeast Asia with far-reaching regions. These findings suggest that the genetic makeup of the Malay population has been shaped not just by proximity to other Southeast Asian peoples, but also by a complex history of interactions with outsiders, driven by trade, religion, and migration. This genetic diversity challenges the long-held view of the Malay community as a relatively homogeneous group and paints a more complex picture of its ancestry. It underscores the fact that the Malay identity is not a static, geographically defined concept, but one that has evolved over centuries through intermingling with various ethnic groups. The Malay population in Singapore, with its varied genetic roots, provides a powerful reminder that identity is shaped by far more than geography or cultural heritage alone. It is also a product of centuries of movement, interaction, and transformation. As genetic studies continue to evolve, the once clear-cut definitions of ethnic groups will continue to blur, revealing the interconnectedness of human history. The mystery of the Singaporean Malays' genetic makeup highlights the complexity of identity itself, fluid, dynamic, and constantly shaped by new connections and discoveries. Chapter 6. The Impact of Genetic Studies on Health and Medicine. Genetic studies in Singapore have uncovered far more than just fascinating insights into the nation's ancestry. They have practical implications that could revolutionize healthcare. The country's diverse, multi-ethnic population presents unique challenges for the medical community, particularly when it comes to understanding how different genetic backgrounds influence susceptibility to diseases and the effectiveness of treatments. While the multicultural makeup of Singapore is celebrated in cultural and social spheres, it also holds significant promise in the realm of personalized medicine and public health. For example, genetic research has revealed that certain ethnic groups in Singapore may have a higher predisposition to particular health conditions, such as diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, and even some cancers. According to a study by the Singapore Health Services, SingHealth, the Chinese population, for instance, is more likely to develop type 2 diabetes compared to the Malay and Indian populations, partly due to genetic factors linked to insulin resistance. Similarly, research by the National University of Singapore has shown that certain genetic markers found in the Indian population make them more susceptible to cardiovascular diseases compared to other ethnic groups. These findings highlight the significant role that genetics plays in the health of individuals. Understanding the genetic predispositions of different groups allows for a more tailored approach to healthcare, where medical treatments and interventions can be adjusted to suit an individual's genetic profile. For example, doctors could use genetic information to predict how a patient might respond to specific medications, reducing the risk of adverse reactions and improving the effectiveness of treatments. This personalized medicine approach is already being applied in Singapore to some extent, with pharmacogenomics being used to determine the most appropriate drugs for patients based on their genetic makeup. Moreover, as genetic studies continue to advance, they hold the potential to reshape public health policies in Singapore. Policymakers could use genetic data to identify at-risk populations and implement targeted interventions before health problems become widespread. For example, if genetic studies show that a certain community is more susceptible to a particular disease, healthcare resources could be directed towards preventative measures or early screening programs, tailored specifically to that group. This approach could lead to more effective healthcare strategies and better management of chronic conditions that disproportionately affect specific populations. In the future, as genetic data continues to be integrated into healthcare systems, it may pave the way for more efficient, personalized, and preventative care that can enhance the overall well-being of the population. By incorporating genetic insights into medical practice, Singapore could lead the way in creating a healthcare model that is as diverse and dynamic as its people, providing a more precise and effective approach to medicine that considers the genetic diversity of the population. This would not only improve individual health outcomes, but could also reduce the burden on the healthcare system, making healthcare more accessible and effective for all. Chapter 7. The Ethics of DNA Testing and Data Privacy. As the popularity of genetic testing rises in Singapore, so do concerns about privacy and the ethical implications surrounding the use of genetic data. More Singaporeans are opting to have their DNA tested, primarily to explore their ancestry and uncover hidden family histories. However, this surge in interest brings up a crucial question. Who owns the genetic data, and how can it be used once it is collected? For many, the idea of sharing their genetic information raises serious concerns. The process of DNA testing not only reveals ancestral roots, but also exposes sensitive health information. While the primary goal for most individuals may be to discover their genetic heritage, there is growing unease about how this data might be used, especially when it comes to privacy and control. In Singapore, where identity is deeply connected to ethnic and genetic backgrounds, there are significant fears that this personal information could be used for commercial or even political purposes. For example, genetic companies could sell data to third parties for marketing, or it could be used by insurance companies to influence decisions regarding coverage, premiums, or eligibility. One of the biggest ethical concerns surrounding DNA testing is the potential for misuse. While genetic testing can offer valuable insights, it also opens the door to potential discrimination. Employers, insurers, or even governments could exploit genetic information to make decisions that are unfair or prejudiced. In a multicultural society like Singapore, where ethnic identity is intertwined with social and cultural life, the idea that genetic data could be used to discriminate against individuals or groups is particularly troubling. For instance, if genetic data is used to predict an individual's likelihood of developing certain diseases, it might lead to unfair treatment, particularly in communities with higher genetic predispositions to specific health conditions. Furthermore, consent and data ownership become critical issues in genetic testing. Many individuals may not fully understand how their genetic data will be used, shared, or stored. The long-term implications of having one's DNA tested are still not entirely clear, and the potential for future misuse looms large. Genetic data can be a powerful tool for medical science, but it also has the potential to be exploited, especially if individuals are not properly informed about how their data will be managed. In a nation like Singapore, which places a high value on its multicultural identity, these issues are even more significant. Singaporeans' diverse genetic backgrounds, shaped by centuries of migration and intermarriage, are central to the nation's identity. As more people turn to genetic testing to explore their ancestry, the need to ensure that genetic data is handled with respect and care becomes even more pressing. A framework that protects individuals' privacy and ensures that their genetic information is used ethically is essential. This would not only prevent the misuse of data, but also preserve the trust that people place in the technology and the companies that provide genetic testing services. Ultimately, the challenge lies in balancing the potential benefits of genetic testing with the need to protect privacy and ensure ethical use. In Singapore, where ethnicity and identity are so closely linked to genetic heritage, the management of genetic data must be handled with utmost care to ensure it serves the interests of individuals, not just companies or governments. Clear regulations, informed consent processes, and strict privacy protections are necessary to safeguard the integrity of genetic data, ensuring it is used responsibly without compromising personal rights or ethnic identities. Chapter 8: The Cultural Implications of Singapore's Hidden DNA. The revelations about Singaporeans' hidden DNA not only shed light on the nation's intricate genetic makeup, but also serve as a profound reminder of the complexity and fluidity of cultural identity. For centuries, Singapore has celebrated its multiculturalism, with its citizens categorized by ethnic groups like Chinese, Malay, Indian, and Eurasian. These labels have shaped much of the nation's social structure, community life, and even national policies. However, the growing body of genetic research is beginning to challenge the very foundations of how we view culture and ethnicity, suggesting that these identities are far more dynamic and interconnected than we often realize. Genetic studies have revealed that Singapore's population, while often classified into distinct ethnic groups, shares much deeper ancestral connections than initially thought. The interconnectedness of different genetic groups, whether they are Chinese, Malay, or Indian, suggests that ancestry is not a static or isolated concept, but rather one shaped by centuries of migration, intermarriage, and cultural exchange. The idea that one's ethnicity could be neatly defined by culture or geography is increasingly being replaced by a more fluid understanding of identity, one that acknowledges the layers of genetic and cultural influences that have shaped who we are today. This raises important questions about the nature of cultural identity and belonging. What does it mean to be Singaporean if our genetic heritage doesn't fit neatly into the traditional boxes of Chinese, Malay, or Indian? Is Singaporean identity solely about culture, language, and traditions, or does it have a deeper, more intrinsic connection to shared genetic heritage? The answer to this question is not clear-cut. While culture undeniably plays a central role in shaping identity through language, customs, and practices, genetic connections reveal that identity is not solely determined by these external markers. In fact, shared ancestry across ethnic groups hints at a more collective and inclusive sense of belonging, one that transcends the traditional labels that have often divided societies. In a nation like Singapore, which prides itself on its multicultural identity, these genetic findings invite a new conversation about unity and diversity. They suggest that Singapore's strength lies not just in the coexistence of different cultures, but in the shared hidden genetic connections that bind the population together. This deeper understanding of identity challenges the notion of cultural purity and fixed boundaries, showing instead that Singapore's true identity is constantly evolving, shaped by both its diverse cultural expressions and its rich, intertwined genetic heritage. Ultimately, as Singapore continues to navigate its place in the world, the implications of these genetic revelations will play a significant role in how the nation defines itself moving forward. The question of what it truly means to be Singaporean may no longer be simply about culture and ethnicity, but about recognizing the complex, interconnected threads that link all Singaporeans together, both culturally and genetically. The future of Singaporean identity may well be one that celebrates this fluidity, acknowledging that identity is not a fixed label, but a living, evolving story. Conclusion: embracing Singapore's genetic diversity. The darkest DNA secret of the Singaporean is that their genetic makeup is far more complex, diverse, and interconnected than we ever imagined. While many have believed that the nation's identity could be neatly divided into Chinese, Malay, Indian, and Eurasian categories, genetic studies have revealed a far deeper, richer narrative. From the unexpected mixing of ancestries across ethnic groups to the intriguing genetic legacy of communities like the Peranakans, Singapore's true identity is not confined to its ethnic labels. Instead, it is a living tapestry woven over centuries of migration, intermarriage, and cultural exchange. As we continue to uncover the hidden layers of Singaporeans' genetic history, it becomes increasingly clear that our identities are far more fluid than we once thought. The genetic connections between different groups highlight a shared heritage that transcends cultural boundaries, showing that the fabric of Singapore society is not just built on its diversity, but on the deep, interwoven ties that bind its people together. Singapore's genetic story reflects resilience and adaptability, shaped by a history of interaction and unity amidst cultural diversity. The true beauty of Singapore lies not just in its diverse population, but in the genetic diversity that fuels it. Each discovery in genetic research is a reminder that our identities are shaped by a dynamic mix of influences, each part of the whole contributing to the rich complexity of who we are. Understanding our genetic roots is not only a way to trace our past, but a means to appreciate the complexity of our present identities. It invites us to reflect on how far we have come as a nation and how our interconnectedness continues to define our collective future. As Singapore moves forward, embracing and celebrating this genetic diversity will be key to shaping a future that honors both our shared history and our diverse heritage. By recognizing the interconnectedness of our genetic backgrounds, we can foster an even deeper sense of unity, one that values both our differences and the ties that bind us. This understanding offers the possibility of a more inclusive, compassionate, and forward-thinking society, one that thrives on its diversity, rooted in the shared human experience of interconnectedness.